Just about a week ago yesterday, last Wednesday, we had a contractor hit our 8-inch steel line that feeds the north end of Zanesville. You know, we talk about 811 and we send all of our flyers out and all of our brochures. Matter of fact, we have a bi-monthly newsletter that goes out to all of our members, and this was absolutely not planned. This article was actually came out the day of that line break. That we talked about 811 and the importance of calling. So the contractor that was hired to go in and do the new bike trail down below ZHS that hooks over to OUZ, apparently figured he didn't need a locate, so no locate was called. And he hit our 8-inch high-pressure steel line that feeds the north end of Zanesville, that feeds the hospital, the surgery center, Nader, pretty much most of everything on the north end. So the gas was blowing. We got the call. Jeff actually gave me the call right about 12 o'clock. We come to find out that the gas line was hit just about 11:57. So an hour later, we got the call, which was last on the contractor side. Thanks to Mr. Hobson over there, he's doing helping with some research on that. But we've contractor told us his response to us was, well, we were just skimming the top of the dirt off. We didn't need a locate. Well, when you look at 811, anytime in excavation the dirt is disturbed, that's an excavation. Whether it's 1 inch or 10 feet, that's an excavation. And as you'll see in some of the pictures, I have a series of pictures here that kind of leads from, this one here was up on top of the hill from when it was blowing. But as we get through some of these pictures, you're going to see where he hit our 8-inch line, he was about 4 foot deep. So he's not just skimming the top of the dirt off, he's taking a little more than just a few inches. So, so when we confronted him about it, actually, I think it was Chief Hobson that confronted him about it, said, well, why didn't you have a locate? And he said, well, that wasn't my responsibility. That was the engineers ahead of this project that was their responsibility to do. Well, if he knows the 811 law, he was completely wrong in that aspect. It's the excavator doing the digging that has to call 811. It's their responsibility to do it, and it's only their responsibility to do it. Nobody else on that job can do it for them. And that's the way it reads in the Ohio Revised Code. That's the law. So from other things we're finding out, this isn't the first time that they didn't call 811 before they started any excavating, and they're an excavating company. We work hard as a company to try to get out to these third parties, the excavators, and talk to them about 811 and the importance of 811. And this case right here is exactly why. As we go through some of the pictures, you're going to see this is about a 3-inch hole. He put in what we call 188 wall steel pipe that he caught with the corner of the dozer blade. So when you talk about an 8-inch line at almost 60 pounds with a 3-inch hole, you're blowing a lot of gas. It was blowing the tops of the trees at, what, I'd say 75, maybe even to 100 feet in the air. The only thing that saved him, a lot of times these will end up in ignition, and that's because of the static from the rush of gas that's coming out of the pipe. The only thing that saved, there's 2 things that saved him actually, was because it is down close to the creek, the soil down there was wet and it was moist, which really helped because that's controlling the static charge that's coming out of that from the gas escaping from the pipeline. The other thing was, and how he even thought about it without just jumping off that dozer, is he actually shut the dozer off before he jumped off and took off running. It could have very easily ignited with him sitting on it, and that would have been a bad deal. So approximately around 11:20 or 12:20, we got our control center started seeing the pressures on our 8-inch line starting to drop, and we haven't received any calls yet. Now, mind you, this was an hour at 1 o'clock, close to an hour at 1 o'clock by the time we got the phone call. So it had already been blowing an hour before we got the message. From what we gathered, the individual went up to a building and sat down trying to figure out what he was going to do. I'm going to guess probably cleaned his shorts out a little bit after he hit it. And then so he started to make some phone calls, but it was to the wrong people. He should have called 911. That should have been his first response. The second response should have been to call 811 because they will notify anybody in the area of the emergency and let them respond. We had already started to respond, but we were looking in a totally different area because of some issues and some contractors that were already working that we knew of. So we weren't actually walking the right spot of that line. We just knew that we were losing pressure and we were losing it fast. So when Jeff called me, I made a call back to our operations manager and I said, hey, we've got a problem on our 8-inch feed in Zanesville. And he said, yeah, we know, we're looking for it. He'd already had joined our control center. They were trying to figure out what the response was going to be. Because we can't just shut this 8-inch line down. It's not that simple. We would have lost all of our north end of Zanesville. So that would have meant any feed that we had going to Genesis Hospital and the surgery center and all those facilities, we would have lost them. So when you go into that emergency mode, you start pulling up maps and you try to figure out what valves are we going to start shutting and what valves do we need to open to start bypassing and backfeeding everything to those areas so that we can maintain gas to everybody. So one of the first things was done was Genesis switched over to Columbia Gas. We shared the load with Columbia Gas, and there's a reason for that. And it's just because of emergencies like this, they have to have an alternative feed. So they switched over to Columbia Gas, but we had to bring our CNG trailer up to feed the surgery center and a few other buildings that couldn't be fed that way. So we were going to several spots on our system to make sure that we could backfeed everything. Approximately 10 till 4, we were able to start blowing this line down. So 4 hours, almost 4 hours, this line blew. So that's a lot of gas loss, all because somebody didn't want to call 811. They didn't feel they needed to call 811. The other issues it brought in, when Jeff contacted me, he said, you know, we've got a gas line blowing. He says, is this yours? And I said, well, where are you at? And he said, well, I'm down in the bottom of ZHS. And I said, yeah, that's our 8-inch. And he said, how far do I need to start evacuating? And I said, well, let me get the guys. We've got guys in there. Let me get them over there and start taking some readings. I think the biggest concern was the nursing home that, as a crow flies, maybe a quarter mile away. So in their response, their thinking is, how many ambulances, how many buses, what are we going to need to get these people evacuated from there? And this plays right into why we do these drills through the LAPC every year, is because you need a plan, right? And that's why we practice these plans as well as a gas company. When things go wrong like this, what's our options and what do we need to do first? So we did have 3 folks in the area. We sent them to the neighborhood that the wind was blowing out of the west, which it was good and bad. I mean, that was probably the worst case scenario for this because it was blowing any of these gas vapors back towards the nursing home in that area that was behind it. But we had guys walking over there. I think the highest reading I was getting called back to me was somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 parts per million, which is not high. Natural gas has an explosion range of anywhere from 5 to 15% gas to air mixture. So we weren't anywhere close to that, even at the Adams Circle back area, which is probably the closest road to it. That's where we were getting the highest readings. Like I said, it was 600 parts per million. So we knew we were okay with that as long as that gas is dissipating, and it's lighter than air, so it's got a natural safety factor built into it. It'll evaporate. All right, it's not like propane, which is a lot heavier than air and will lay low, because Jeff was constantly monitoring the weather. We had bad storms getting ready to roll in. So now lightning was a factor. Were we going to have a static charge or a lightning hit close by that could ignite this gas? They even went as far as thinking, hey, you know what? This is our flight path from MedFlight to the hospital. Do we need to reroute MedFlight or the helicopters out of this area? So I got to hand it to Chief Hobson and the fire department and Jeff and EMA. They were on top of things. I mean, it was, in my opinion, it couldn't have been handled any smoother than what it was, the cooperation between them and the fire department and us, and trying to get people isolated. Reverse 911 that was sent out to everybody in the area to shelter in place was perfect. At that point, I don't think they really knew what it was until the media had put out that there was a gas leak in the area, which didn't seem to have any panic with anybody until they heard there was a gas leak, and then we started getting calls as the Energy Cooperative. So everything kind of goes into that emergency mode. Like I said, the fella didn't have have an 811 call. So he started off completely wrong right off the bat. It is the law. And for some reason, even though he was out of town, these guys all know that they need to call. And that's the main part of this is I want to stress. I don't care if you're planting a tree in your backyard. If you're digging a foot in the ground, 6 inches in the ground, you need to call. You need to call 811 and give the 48 hours and let somebody respond. Because I've seen numerous electric lines that are only buried 6 inches deep. And that's a service to the house. That's 480 volts. I don't think you want to put a shovel at 480 volts. So this gentleman got very lucky. This is standing up on top of the hill. Let me see if I can zoom down just a little bit here. So you can see the dozer. What they were doing is he's getting a little bit deeper here because they was building a bridge across the creek right there so they could continue on. So as you can tell by the dirt pile right there, the spoil pile, I don't think he was just skimming a few inches off the top. I think we measured just real close to 4 foot to the top of our pipe from where it was at. You'll see in some of the pictures coming up. Just a little bit more in depth than what he was anticipating. So this one here, this is our track hoe that came down to try to expose everything. You can see his front bucket here. The 8-inch pipe is right here. This is a lot of the dirt and some of the moisture that was coming out of the line. Because like I said, 60 pounds isn't considered high pressure, but when you talk about 8 inches, an 8-inch pipeline with a 3-inch hole, you're talking a lot of volume. As you saw in the picture before, we were at the top of the hill, which maybe 60 to 80 yards away from the pipeline, and it was all you could do to stand right there without ear protection. I mean, it was screaming. Jeff said that's how he first found out about it, because he was coming down Adams Lane, and he got a whiff of something. He wasn't sure what it was at first, because he said it didn't smell like mercaptan, which is what we odorize our gas with. But he heard the hiss. He heard the gas screaming. So he knew he had a problem and something was wrong. So that was a decent ways away. It was pretty loud. So this is just a little bit, you can see the main here. He caught it with the front of the dozer, and he must have, at first, wasn't sure what he did, because he backed the dozer up probably a good 3 feet. A lot of times what we'll get is with contractors, when they'll dig into a line like this, is they'll take the dirt and they throw it back over the pipe because they don't have to hear it anymore, because it's loud, it screams. That's the absolute worst thing you can do. At least here he was smart enough to leave it open, because natural gas will find that easiest path of resistance to escape. So as long as it's open and venting into the air, it's dissipating. If you cover it back up, it doesn't have anywhere to go but lay under there, and it'll try and find a way to escape. So a lot of times it'll find a sewer line, a water line, electric line. It likes previous ditches where the ground's been disturbed, and a lot of them, that water lines and sewer lines have gravel packed around them, so it's easy for it to flow through. Well, guess what that means? It's following that line into somebody's house or a business's house, because that's where that line's headed. So that's why we try to tell them, if you do hit one, don't cover it up, turn the equipment off, go call for help, leave it be. This one, like I said, we got lucky that it didn't ignite. The best thing to do if it does ignite is to let it go. Just let it burn, because it's controlled. I know it's a burn, but it's a controlled burn. and we're not having to worry about that gas migrating somewhere to where we don't want it. So this is after our excavator got it opened up a little bit. I've got some better pictures. This was one that was sent to me. It's just a little bit blurry, but you can see the size of the hole. It's about the size of a softball, and that's pretty thick pipe. So there's a little bit more of a comparison. This is one of our guys just kind of sticking his hand down here to get an idea how big it is. So you can see the size of the line. I mean, when you talk about an 8-inch line, you don't really think about the circumference of it until you actually see it. This is after they'd already got the section cut out. So to go to cut this out, we have to open up certain points in the system because we have to be able, any residual gas that's in that pipeline once it's blown down, we have to make sure that we're evacuating out of that pipeline to somewhere else and not coming to this area where they're working. So we have what we call air movers that are put on different stations. We had one down at Rail Check, which is by the Allwell, down there just below Adams Lane. And then we had another one clear down on Linden Avenue at the other end of it. It was pulling that residual gas away from these guys because you're going to see when you're working with steel pipe, it's not as easy as working with plastic. Plastic will give you a lot more static charge, but it's a lot easier to work with. You can fuse plastic fairly quick. When it comes to a steel line like this, you don't just stick a piece of pipe in there and throw some couplers on it and be done with it. There's welding on both sides of it that has to be done. Several passes of weld have to be done. You can see here, these are their bonding clamps, because once you separate that piece of pipe, you have to connect them with a wire, a bonding wire, so you keep that electric current the same on both sides, because that different potential in electric that's on that pipe is when you get your static charge. It's a lot like electricity. If you're the difference in potential between one piece of that wire and the other, it's going to pass through you. Well, that's the same with static charge. There's always a current on this pipe. Just like with plastic pipe, as that gas is flowing through it, it builds up a static charge in that line. So there's always a charge on it. Here again, you can see how muddy how wet the ground, and this was before the storms hit that night. About 7:30, we got hit with a torrential downpour before we'd even got the pipe back together yet. So we got things covered up, and we basically just had to sit and wait it out for a little bit. And I have a picture when they're have it back together and some of them a little bit later. But so this is the one I wanted to show, and this is the reason why we have air movers on there. Because what are we introducing to that gas line? We don't have any choice with steel, and you stick an arc on there with a welder, now you're introducing even more. So the air movers that pull that air both directions is taking that air up the pipeline and getting it away from those guys so it's safe for them to work. If we don't, any residual gas, once you open that up, acts like a chimney effect, and it will send any residual gas right to their work. And when you have grinders going and welders going, next thing you know, you've got a nice big fire. And that's why all of our guys are in long sleeve. This was a hot day. These guys are all in long sleeve FR shirts, jeans. That's the way they work every day. They have to work in that when it's 90 degrees or whether it's 9 degrees. You'll notice we have two guys up here. They're on fire watch. Usually we have one, but anytime you open it up like that and you're introducing any kind of ignition, whether it's a grinder or welders, we put two guys on fire watch with at least 20 or 30-pound bottles. Is that going to put the fire out? No, but it's going to give those guys that's down in that hole a barrier to let them get out. That's about all it's going to do. So that's why we dress them in the FR, because if things do go wrong, it goes wrong in a hurry. And believe me, the FR clothing works. It really works. So this is the piece they took out. We cut about a 6-foot piece of pipe out of there. This was up on the stands after they'd taken it out. That's just another another shot of it. So, I mean, this pipe, we're talking every bit of a 1/4 inch hard steel. So the front corner of that blade on that dozer just peeled both directions all the way back. And you saw where the direction he was coming in from. So it wasn't like he was hitting it at 20 miles an hour. He was hitting it pretty slow because he's grading a good bit of dirt out of it. But it was enough pressure, the corner of that blade caught it. If it would have been square, where the front of the blade would have hit and not the corner, it probably would have just rode up over it and taken the coating off. But the way he came into it, worst case scenario. And that's the other thing that most of them don't understand, the excavators, even if he had just scraped the coating off this, they are required by a high revised code to call the operator of the pipeline or the electric line, whatever it might be, to get repairs done. If this was just would have been a coating that was peeled off right here, now we've got a weak point in that line. Because we do have an electric charge on that pipeline, it's to help it from corrosion. All the electrons in that pipeline want to leave at that spot where that coating's gone. And that probably would have rusted a hole through that pipe within 1 to 2 years. That quick. We have sacrificial anodes that we put on the pipeline, so it eats those anodes up before it eats the pipeline, but we do put a charge on it to help with that. So this one here, they're fitting the new piece of pipe in. Again, with a steel piece of pipe, a piece of steel pipe, it has to be exact. Your tolerances when you go to make those welds on both ends, they have to be as tight as you can get, because you're basically melting metal in there with each bead that they pass around there. So the bigger gap you have, the more of the slag that just drops inside the pipe, and it's going to be impossible to get that weld. So it has to fit tight. They cut it close and they take the grinders and they get it till it fits just right to drop it down in there. These are their clamps they have on both sides, because once they get it down in there, they slide over and it clamps up over and holds that pipe exactly even all the way around, so they can start putting their root bead around it. Once they get that root bead on, the clamps can come off and they can continue welding. But the air movers are pulling air the whole time. This one's kind of hard to judge the depth of it, to kind of get an idea how deep he was. Top of their helmets over there, that's still not quite the top of the ditch. So I think it was like 3 foot 10 inches to the top of our main, to the top of the ground. So this is a little different perspective. This is looking at it from the new bridge they're putting in. So it does kind of give you an idea of the depth. This is the top of the ground here, the top of the pipe. So you can still see the wet soil down there. It was, even though it hadn't rained for a few days, we're down by the creek. This was the lowest point. So this one here, this picture, I think it was around 10:45 I took this picture. This is after the storms had already passed. We got it back together. We'd already purged the line. So you have to figure, we shut this down at Linden Avenue and up at Rail Check. We blew down about 2 miles of this pipeline, close to 2 miles of pipeline. That's a lot of gas, not to mention what was lost over the 4 hours that it blew. But we had to evacuate the whole pipeline before we could work on it. So once we get it back together, we have to slowly start introducing that gas back to it again, because we have to get that gas back to 100% gas in that pipeline before we can open things back up. Because if we have too much air mixture in that gas line when we turn it on to feed everything else, pilot lights aren't going to stay lit. So we have to make sure we get one in that we get 100% gas back on it, that we know that it's clear of any air that might be in it, which takes time as well. So this is just getting the coating on it. They had to pump this excavation out. There was probably a good 6 inches of water laying down in there by the time the storm was over. Like I said, we were down at the bottom, so we were catching anything off that hillside, but it doesn't make things easy. They're still standing about a good 3 inches of mud trying to work and do all this after that rain. I threw this one up here because part of what I wanted to talk about now, a lot of you in here might know the Ohio 811. It used to be called OOPS. We call it OOPS. They never liked to hear it called OOPS. It's Ohio Utility Protection Service. That was your one call in Ohio to call to get a locate. They have formally changed over to Ohio 811, which kind of bonds with the rest of the nation with the 811 call. That's a national number that anybody can call to get a locate on your region. So to make things simple, they went to Ohio 811 versus the OUPS. They still have their 800 number that you can call, but you can just dial 811 and reach them immediately. It is a little bit different if it's a production or gas development line. Those guys kind of fall under a different, there's some legislation trying to go through right now to get them merged together as one, but all PUPS is the acronym for any wells or gathering lines that's raw production. Unfortunately, as of right now, that's not a one-stop shop, but it's close. They're close to joining forces, which will help a lot. The other thing I wanted to mention was, and I don't know if any of you have it in here, it might be, Doug, it might be a good app for you to have as well as Jeff. If you guys don't have the OOPS app on your phone, you can actually look up tickets. That was the first thing I did when I got down there that night, was I wanted to see if they had a locate. So if you get on the OOPS or the Ohio 811 app, you can click, there's a little tab on there, it's called Near Tickets. And if you click on that Near Ticket, it'll pull up any ticket that's close to you in your area and let you know what locates have been called in. There wasn't one called in by this company. There were 5 called in. One was from us because we had an emergency locate because of the line hit. But none of them was from the company that hit it. So that's a good way to find out, especially if you're an excavator or you're going to be doing the digging. If you call that or just pull up that Near Ticket on the OOPS app, you'll know if it's good. You can also check to see what utilities have already been there and cleared it or made their locates, because they have to give a confirmation. By law now, they have to give a confirmation if they're either cleared or they make a locate. You can find all that on this app. It's a very good app to have.